Now, when we start talking about science in the Bible then, I just can make a couple quick points here. Again, I don't walk around speaking as a scientist. I'm really not that, no, I don't have expertise in that area at all. But I want to talk about the Bible, and so we have to know how the Bible interacts a bit with science. And I just want to make two quick points here. The first one is that in the Bible, there is no scientific revelation. That's such an important point. Israel is not getting any new understanding of the material world, its mechanisms, its operations, or anything of that sort. No new information. Now, they can observe the world, and they might make some of the same observations that we make when we observe the world, even in our modern times. But they didn't get that by revelation. In other words, anything that's in the Bible about the workings of the material world were things that Israel already believed and that all of the nations around them already believed. Like I mentioned with the waters, waters above, waters below, like in Genesis 1. Everybody in the ancient world believed that. That's not kind of a breakthrough revelation, okay? And that's true all the way through the Old Testament. There's not a single thing that would have been new news. Now, the example I put up there is a heart. Everybody in the ancient world believed that the cognitive processes took place down here. Okay, the heart, the stomach, the kidneys, the liver, the intestines, that was where your emotions and your intellect, your thinking, all those cognitive processes took place down here. They had no idea of the physiology of the brain. We don't know an ancient Hebrew word for brain. There is no physiology of the brain. Now, that's a fairly significant scientific issue. But the fact is, God doesn't try to bring them along by revealing to them the physiology of the brain. If he wants to talk to them about thinking, he still talks about their heart. Or, for instance, when he says, with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, mind, not the word for brain, that's the word for entrails. So God just uses what they knew to communicate. This is happening in their world. Okay, so God's not giving them new science, he's giving them what they need to communicate in their context. And we can't read science into that. We don't need to figure out how a blood pump does cognitive processes in order to affirm the Bible. We just recognize he's using that communication to talk to them about more important things, because in the end, no matter what you think with, whether it's your brain or your heart or your intestines or your big toenail, think godly thoughts. That's the point. Okay, so God's not about revealing the mechanics of the material world. There is no new scientific revelation in the Bible. That means modern science is not there. Secondly, observation of natural cause and effect does not remove God from the picture. Psalm 139 says, the psalmist says to God, "You knit me together in my mother's womb." That's not a statement that somehow then ruins the embryology, that we can't do that anymore because that would be some godless atheistic pursuit, since the Bible says God knits us together in our mother's womb. We understand then that everything we find out about embryology is just another way of understanding how God knits us together in our mother's womb. So just because we have God involved in cause and effect does not mean that natural cause and effect does not exist or cannot be identified. That also means then, of course, that anything that science identifies in terms of natural cause and effect can easily be brought under the umbrella of God's activity. One does not rule out the other. Now, once we have those kinds of things sorted out, as on this slide, it gives us a lot more freedom in terms of thinking what claims the Bible is making. Okay, it's not making modern scientific claims. That's not the revelation that's being given. It's not making exclusive claims that there's no intermixture between natural and so-called supernatural. For them, there was no natural cause and effect. In the ancient world, there's only divine cause and effect or human cause and effect. There is no impersonal cause and effect. And so they wouldn't think in terms of natural laws. No such thing as natural laws. Okay, God was doing everything. For that reason, you won't really find the Bible talking about intervention. We throw the word around a lot, but the Bible doesn't talk about that. because you can't intervene in something you're doing. And God was doing it all. So what's there to intervene in? He's already in. It's him. So again, sometimes we set up a dichotomy that's unnecessary and actually inaccurate in the process. Okay, so my proposed thesis. How do I come at Genesis 1? What are the key issues I talk about? The first one is a functional focus. That is, I'm going to suggest that the interest in the ancient world, as I talked about origins, as I talked about creation, is in functions, not in material. We'll talk about it in a minute. The second part is the cosmic temple, and we'll describe that as we go along. Those are the two main points I have to talk about relative to Genesis chapter 1. And we will try to get to Genesis 2 and 3 some today. So functional focus, let's hit it first. In the ancient, functional focused existence is defined by having a function, not by having a material structure. This is so weird to us. It is really difficult to wrap our brains around this. But for them, something did not exist just because it happened to have material properties that you could see or touch, anything of that sort. For us, that means it exists. But they talked about existence of things like, well, non-existence of things like the desert and the cosmic oceans did not exist. We say, what kind of crazy idea is that? It's theirs. And so we have to pay attention because it shows us how they think. So they would think of those things as non-existent. Existence was not something defined by material. It was defined by function. When something was functioning in an ordered system, then it existed. Okay? So Genesis 1 provides an account, I would propose, an account of functional origins, not an account of material origins. Now again, that's very different. We've always looked at it as material origins because that's us. That's our world. That's how we think. That's how we think about existence. That's what we think creation is. Though, of course, we sometimes use the word differently. We talk about creating a curriculum or creating a committee. Wow, you're good. You created that committee. Yeah. Okay, creating a masterpiece. See, we even have a range for how we use this word create. And Hebrew is no different in the way that it works with that. And so creation basically is to bring something from non-existence to existence. That's an act of creation. Now, how do you do that? Well, it depends how you define non-existence and how you define existence. And then that depends then on what mechanisms can move something from one place to the other. In the Bible, naming something is a creative act because to name it is to give it a role and a function. And therefore, you've created it by naming it. Naming is separating it from something else because then you've given it an individual identity. That's a creative act. And that's true in the Bible, and it's true in the ancient world. Again, in these things, the Bible holds right with the ancient world on how to think about those. The Bible's got a lot of new theology to give the Israelites. But on lots of these other issues, it's working very much like the ancient world is. Genesis 1, then, is about God bringing order, that is functionality, out of disorder. Now, I need to change that. Well, here's a glitch in my new PowerPoint. Non-order, it should be, not disorder. I define non-order as morally neutral. Disorder is a morally defective situation. So when sin enters the world, then disorder enters. But there is a non-order, okay? And that non-order, for instance, the example, down in my basement, you know, my kids have moved out. Their stuff has not. So down in our basement, all around the perimeter are these boxes. That is non-order. It's not disorder. They're all packed in boxes. They're kind of off to the side. They're stacked up, but it's non-order. I create a little island of order right in the middle where the ping pong table is, okay, and there's order. Now, if a possum gets in there and gets in all the boxes and makes a mess, that's disorder, okay? But so there's non-order and there's order and there's disorder. Creation is bringing order out of non-order into non-order. It's not like God changes non-order to order. It's rather that he brings order into it, and that is the creative act. We'll get more into that as we go along. So, about bringing order, functionality out of non-order, non-functionality. So, more of the functional focus. It's fruitless then to ask what things God created on any given day, for the text is not concerned about the existence of matter. Matter is not really a category for them. And it's not really what they would consider the most important part of origins. Remember now, please let me make this clear. There's no question that whatever exists, God created. Material, functional, whatever exists, God created. But Genesis 1 is covering in about 30 verses, an awful lot of material. And so we have to ask the question, what part of the story are they going to tell? You can't tell the whole story in 30 verses. What part of the story are they going to tell? And that's what we're really trying to figure out. It's a literary question and then a theological question. We don't expect the text to cover every aspect of origins from every perspective. That would be asking an awful lot for 30 verses. So we're trying to figure out what part of the story it tells. So they're really not concerned with matter. They have no way of probing the material world. They don't have any sort of modern understanding of the material world. And in the end, it doesn't matter. It's how it works that's more important. When you get a new job, you don't start asking all kinds of questions about the architect and general contractor who built the building a century ago. You want to know who you report to, who signs your paychecks, who's going to do your evaluations, who you work with. You want to know how that company works. So we can understand the same kinds of thinking. Remember, they don't view themselves as inhabitants in a machine universe. They view themselves as inhabitants in a kingdom. It's a different way to view things. When you go looking for a new residence, family walks in, realtor showing them around, open house, and they're really interested in this place, and so they're checking it all out. Maybe the father goes looking around at, plaster walls and the cedar siding, roof looks pretty new, the heating, air conditioning looks in pretty good shape, fairly recent, checking out the plumbing, all of those things, right? The wife maybe says, now, where are we going to put that furniture? And what's the traffic flow going to be here? And this room was a dining room. I think we'll make it a study. That would work better for us. Now, we need a downstairs bathroom or bedroom. Let's use this one that way. And the kids are running all around the house. Which room's mine? Which room's mine? Now, when I have students over our home, and they're admiring my home, they're very kind and admiring my home, so they start asking me about it. Okay, now, what do they want to hear? Do they want to hear the house story, or do they want to hear the home story? They don't want me to tell them about the building of the house. They want to know about me moving in and making it my home. It's a different story. To be a home, you need a house, but the house story is a different story than the home story. When we think of ourselves in the cosmos and think in house terms, we feel minuscule, a speck among teeming humanity, which is a speck on this large planet, which is a speck in a solar system, which is a speck in the galaxy, which is a speck, right? We get feeling, sorry, did I depress you? It gets us feeling very minuscule. The house story is an intimidating one. Grandeur, yes. Glory, yes. Wonder, absolutely. But intimidating. The home story that the Bible has to tell says we are invited guests into God's place. This is his home. He's made it his home. He's invited us here as his honored guests. A very different story, the home story. And so I suggest that in Genesis 1, we don't have the house story. We might be very interested in the house story, but that's not what we have here. Again, it's for us, but it's not to us.